What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. In this episode, I'm going to be previewing the Week 9 action. Another good week ahead, not quite as loaded as what we had last week, but some interesting games to go over. So before I get into it, though, if you're going to enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. Diving right into it, you got number 8, Ole Miss, who's 6-1, at number 13, Oklahoma, who's also 6-1. As I'm recording this video, Sooners are favored by 4.5. The Rebels coming into this game have the number 2 passing offense and the number 3 total offense in the SEC. Trinidad Chambliss has been a big part of that since coming in for Austin Simmons. He has an 84.4 QBR, which is 8th best in the nation. And then he has a bunch of receivers. He has 5 receivers who have over 275 receiving yards. Harrison Wallace III leads the way with 400. Daquan Wright is close behind. Then you got Deuce Alexander, Dejon Stribling, and Caden Lee. Each of those guys has at least 1 touchdown as well. So lots of options for Chambliss to throw the ball to. He's also able to run the ball really well. So this is a really well-rounded Ole Miss offense. They do favor the pass, but a really good overall offense. They're going to be going up against probably their toughest test yet. I know Georgia was a tough test, at least in terms of opponent, but this offense specifically going against the number 1 total, pass, rush, and scoring defense. Across the board, the number 1 defense in the SEC, one of the top defenses in the country in Oklahoma. They're also first in the nation in sacks with 28. Leading the way, R. Mason Thomas, defensive lineman, with 5.5 sacks. He's among the SEC and national leaders in that. Taylor Wine, Jaden Jackson, and then Grayson Hall, and each of those 3 guys also have 2.5 or more sacks. Kip Lewis also leads the way from linebacker, leads the team in tackles. He also has the pass deflection and half a sack. And then one area, though, that this Oklahoma defense hasn't really done a whole lot of is creating turnovers. The Sooners have just 3 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery on the season. I think this is going to be a big test for the Ole Miss offense. And I think, Oklahoma looked better last week against South Carolina. I think they kind of continue that. John Mateer kind of looked like he was getting back into the flow of things last week. And I think the Ole Miss defense has had their moments. But I also think, that game that looked really good defensively against LSU kind of lessens in just how good that looks because of the struggles that LSU has had on offense. So for this one, I'm going to go with Oklahoma 27, Ole Miss 24, but I am going to go with the Rebels to cover on the road. Next up, another top 15 SEC matchup. This one is huge for playoff implications. Oklahoma has a lot, kind of a daunting slate ahead after this, but that one's huge for the Sooners if they can win. Also for Ole Miss, their schedule gets a lot easier. But the next one here, number 15 Missouri at number 10 Vanderbilt. And how about the Commodores being in the AP top 10 for the first time, I think, since 1947. 6-1 is also their best record in 75 years. Both teams are 6-1 going into this one. The Tigers have the number 1 rushing offense in the SEC, number 3 in scoring, and number 4 in total offense. Ahmad Hardy leads the way. He's first in the SEC in rushing yards with 840, a total that ranks 3rd nationally, and he also has 11 touchdowns. The Commodores, on the flip side, have the number 2 scoring offense and the number 3 rushing offense. Diego Pavia, obviously the electric quarterback, a lot to be said about him, but also keep an eye on Cedric Alexander at running back, Eli Stowers, his leading receiver as well, from the tight end position. To me, I think the defensive advantage here is decidedly in Missouri's favor. They're number 2 in total and rush defense in the SEC, number 3 against the pass, number 4 in scoring. Josiah Trotter leads the way from linebacker, 44 tackles with a sack. And then Dre Norwood does a really good job of getting pass deflections or breakups, however you want to term it, in the secondary. He has 4 of those this season. Vanderbilt, meanwhile, has allowed the most passing touchdowns. Now, that might not be huge here because Missouri's certainly going to favor running the ball, but how Vanderbilt's red zone defense does against Missouri, if they do decide to pass it with Bo Prabula there and some of the guys like Brett Nortfleet, who's a really good receiving option for the Tigers, I think that'll be interesting to see. I'm not going to say the fairy tale is over because Vanderbilt still has some key games that they could win and get into the playoff. I think the fairy tale kind of takes a little bit of a turn here. I'm going to go with Missouri 24, Vanderbilt 20. And Commodores, I'm gonna keep doubting you, I guess. So prove me wrong again this week. They proved me wrong the last couple of weeks this season. Have done a really good job overall. So we'll see if they can do it again. Finally, the third top 20 matchup. Now, talk all you want, whatever side you fall on. If you're on SEC side and you feel like your conference is the best in college football, or if you're on Big Ten, kind of rest of college football, you're like, well, the only reason they're ranked is because of media bias or whatever. What you can't argue with is the fact that both of these teams have played tough schedules, both in and out of conference, and that those other four teams that I talked about only have one loss. There's a lot of teams that are in the discussion in the Big Ten. Should they be ranked? Should they not? I think some of those teams probably should be ahead of LSU, but there's only, one one-loss team in the Big Ten, Oregon, and then you got a bunch of two-loss teams, and obviously Ohio State and Indiana are the only undefeated teams left. So a lot of space there. Definitely more of a discussion that maybe I can get into some other time, but I'll save that for a different time. In this game, number 3, Texas A&M, who's 7-0, at number 20, LSU, who's 5-2. To me, this is really the last chance for LSU's college football playoff hopes. If they lose, we saw it last year, and I think it's kind of the same story this year. I don't think you get into the playoff with 3 losses. They'd also be outside the top 25, most likely. At least they should be with a 3rd loss, and it'd be hard to kind of make up that ground to get back into the picture. They would need some help in front of them. The Aggies have the number 5 SEC offense in both in total, passing and rushing offense. They're top 5 in all those categories. Marcel Reed at quarterback, Le'Veon Moss at running back, wide receivers Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion kind of lead the way there. LSU, meanwhile, has the 5th worst offense in total, rushing, and scoring, each of those 3 categories, but they will have a strength of their defense, which is number 3 in scoring in the SEC. Whit Weeks has been kind of dealing with an injury. Seemed like he was maybe sick in game a couple weeks ago, so we'll see what his health looks like into this one. Obviously, Harold Perkins is a fantastic linebacker. AJ Halsey, shouted out some of those guys last week before that game against Vanderbilt. How they play here will be vital. But I think a major disruptor in this game is going to be Texas A&M defensive lineman Cassius Howell. He has 8.5 sacks this season. I think he's going to be, LSU is going to have to double team him to protect Garrett Nussmeier, but I think Howell's going to be in Nussmeier's face all day. I think it's going to be a rough game for LSU offensively once again. I think it's fairly close, but I've got Texas A&M winning on the road in Death Valley, kind of putting the Tigers' college football playoff hopes to bed with a 31-23 win. Those are the 3 marquee games, and there's a lot of other kind of interesting, intriguing games. You've got Northwestern at Nebraska, 2 5-2 teams in the Big Ten. The Huskers kind of laid a dud at Minnesota. I think they respond here. They've still got 2 of the best players in the Big Ten offensively in quarterback Dylan Raiola and Emmett Johnson at running back. I'm going to go with Nebraska 34, Northwestern 27. Staying in the Big Ten then, number 23, Illinois at Washington. Again, a battle of 2 5-2 Big Ten teams. The Huskies last week were stomped by Michigan. The question here, kind of like Nebraska, can they respond to a big loss? I mean, these are all 4 of these teams, believe it or not, with 2 losses are in the discussion for the playoff, especially Northwestern, because they have one of the most unique distinctions right now. Every single opponent left on their schedule for the Wildcats is currently 5-2. So they're going to have a very good schedule if they can find a way to go on a historic run and win out. Northwestern, they'd be 10-2, so they would be in the playoff. Every team that's in the Big Ten, yes, with these 2 losses, you're going to have to win out. But they're not out of the college football playoff race. I think really till you get that 3rd loss. Now I know it's, absolute long shot, outside chance to make it. But every team that I'm talking about here has a possible shot. Illinois, though, I think I like their defense a little bit more maybe than I like Washington's defense. And I also think they get a big win here. They're going to need it. They're 23. They, out of those teams that I've talked about, probably have the best shot already being in the rankings. I'm going to go with Illinois 27, Washington 20. Michigan is that other Big Ten team that's also in the rankings, somehow ahead of USC. But anyways, shifting gears over to the Big 12, really an interesting game here. Houston at number 24, Arizona State. The Cougars are 6-1. The Sun Devils are 5-2. They're averaging not a great total, 29.4 points per game, but Connor Weigman is leading this offense really well. They're 3-1 in Big 12 play. while the Sun Devils are coming in off of a big win over Texas Tech last week. I think the key factor here is going to be Arizona State's defense. They're number 2 in the Big 12 in rushing yards allowed per game specifically. I think also the advantage of being at home is big here. I'm going with Arizona State 31, Houston 27. Finally, BYU at Iowa State. This is a big game for the Cougars, for the other Cougars, I guess. They're 7-0. Iowa State's 5-2, coming off of a bye after back-to-back losses. 2 byes in 5 weeks for the Cyclones after two kind of tough road losses. So they're returning back to Ames this week. The Cougars won a big Holy War against Utah, the first ranked Holy War since 2009. They've got a tough test here, but I really like the BYU defense, and I like Bear Bachmeier at quarterback, so I'm going with the Cougars 24, Cyclones 14. Finally, one other interesting game, Baylor at Cincinnati. The Bearcats are up to 24 in the country. I think they're playing really well. Baylor has kind of had some issues here and there. I think the fact that this is at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati is to the Bearcats' advantage. So I'm going to go with Cincinnati getting the win there. Another interesting Big Ten game. I think this one is also between a pair of 5-2 teams. Minnesota at Iowa. I'm not going to take as deep of a dive there. Minnesota had a big win last week against Nebraska. Iowa had that win, a late clutch field goal against Penn State, who has been reeling. I think Iowa wins at home here. Finally, my group of 5 segment that I have started to do, at least recently, every week. There's really one big game that lost a little bit of its magnitude. You've got USF at Memphis. To me, it's all about the Bulls' defense. I know Byron Brown is a really good quarterback, but the way that they create turnovers is just like they're doing it for fun. I think they do that again here. I'm going to go with USF 27, Memphis 17. But that is all for my Week 9 picks and previews. Let me know in the comments below who you think will win all of these key games. And stay tuned. I'll hopefully be bringing you guys a video here talking about who I think are the best candidates for the job openings at Penn State and at Florida. So stay tuned for that. That's all for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.